Well, welcome to another edition of Take 5. We are talking about the life and the faith of Gideon, and we're trying to find ourselves in various moments in the life of Gideon where we can connect with him and put ourselves in the text and see how the faith of Gideon can apply to you and me today. So far, we've already seen some things that really look just like us as we have studied this. Today, I want to take it a little further and try to bring this thing to a close about the life of Gideon. Now, yesterday we left off talking about this great victory that God is going to give Gideon with just 300 men against an army of 135,000 enemies. God is going to give him victory with just 300 men. And from that, we determined that less is always more by faith with God. So I want to give you some details up to that battle, how it occurred, and then a couple of things that happened after it that you may not really be aware of. And I believe it'll be a good cap to this story of Gideon this week. So when God gives him the instructions to reduce his army from 32,000 down to 300, that would frighten anyone. That would scare anyone to death. And so God says, Gideon, if you're afraid, take your friend and go down into the camp of the Midianites, the Amalekites, the Ishmaelites. Sneak down there and you will learn not to be afraid. You'll hear some things that will encourage you. So that same night, Gideon and his friend Purah disguised themselves, and they went down in the midst of this camp of three enemies, and they just mingled amongst the crowd, and they come upon a group of soldiers that were talking, and one of them said he had had a dream. And the dream that he had was strange at best. He said that in his dream, a loaf of barley bread came rolling down the hill and knocked over the tent of the Midianites that was there. And another friend that was there gave the interpretation to that dream and said, that is nothing more than the sword of Gideon, for the God of the Hebrews has given him the victory, and he's going to defeat us. Well, that encouraged Gideon when he heard that, and he worshiped the Lord, and he ran back up the hill and prepared himself for battle. Now, before I go any further, I want you to understand something this morning. The devil is not standing over you, your life, or your family as some big looming giant that has the ability to destroy you. When you have faith in God, He and His forces actually fear what God is going to do through you. So don't be afraid of your circumstances that are in front of you, my friend, because your circumstances are already afraid of what God is going to do through you. So trust the Lord. He's not going to fail you, and you will win the victory, and you don't have to be afraid because your enemy is already afraid of what God's going to do in your life. So Gideon goes back up at the instruction of the Lord, which sounds really weird. He takes those 300 men, he divides them up into three groups of 100. He gives every one of them a torch and a clay pot to put over that torch to hide the light so that the enemy can't see it. And he gives them a trumpet in the other hand. And he scatters them out in three companies of 100 around on the hillside with the enemy down in the valley. And Gideon says, when I give you the command, take that clay pot and break it off of the torch so the light can be seen. Blow that trumpet with all of your might, and then shout the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. And when we do that, God's going to give us the victory. So they scattered out around there, and he did just that. He gave the command. They broke the pot off of the torch. Those lights lit up that surrounding hillside there with the enemy down in the valley. They blew those horns, and they shouted that great shout of victory there. And it so confused the enemy because their camp was in darkness, because this is all happening about 11 or 12 o'clock at night. Their camp is in darkness, and they are so confused because of no light and the light surrounding them and the trumpets blaring and these men shouting the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. They're frightened. The dreams that they have had that Gideon is going to defeat them, they don't know that Gideon only has 300 men. He may have 300,000 or 3 million as far as they're concerned, but they're afraid. And as they move around and are running for their life, they begin to bump into one another. And when they begin to bump into one another in the dark, they begin to fight one another and kill one another. And many, 120,000 of them die in that valley there because of confusion, and also at the hand of Gideon, who he and his army do eventually join the fight there and slay many of those that are there. 15,000 of them and the 2 kings of Midian flee out of that valley. And Gideon does not just stop in the valley settled with that victory. He decides that he's not going to be happy with victory until the last enemy is defeated. And he and that 300 men take off and begin to pursue them. And Judges chapter 8 verse number 4 said that Gideon came to Jordan and crossed over. He and the 300 men that were with him, listen to this, they were exhausted, yet they were pursuing. Don't ever let anybody ever tell you that the life of faith is not tiring. It can be wearisome. It can wear you down. It's hard to live and fight and endure by faith. It can be tough. It can be mentally and emotionally and physically and spiritually strenuous. But you've got to be willing to keep moving forward. Even though you're exhausted, you keep moving in the direction God has you going by faith, and victory will absolutely be yours. Gideon moves forward pursuing this 15,000 men with 300, mind you, and those 2 kings. He is pursuing them, and he comes to one city of the Israelites, and they're tired, and he asks them for bread, and they won't give him any. He comes to another city, and he asks them for bread to sustain his men and strengthen them, and that city won't give him any either. And this just tells you that sometimes when you're following God by faith, you can't expect everybody to help you. They're not going to understand. But if God has put you on this journey and you will keep your faith in Him, I promise you, God will be with you until you get the complete victory, and you won't need anybody's help. It'll be the hand of the Lord that does it every step of the way. Gideon pursues until he finds them in an enclosed fortress. They invade that city, destroy and defeat those Midianites, capture those 2 kings, kill them, come back into the land where he was living there, and he lives as judge over Israel, and they have peace for the next 40 years because this one man's faith, a man that was originally hiding, a man that had low self-esteem, a man that had questions, a man that had all of these things against him, chose to put his faith in God, and he got complete victory in his life because he trusted the Lord every step of the way. Can I tell you something? God will absolutely do the same for you and me today. He's just looking for somebody to put faith in Him. Well, hey, it's been a good week. I've got to get out of here. I look forward to being with you Monday when we start a brand new week of Take 5 devotions. Until then, God bless you. Have a great day. Trust the Lord, friend. He will never fail you.